Hello and welcome to the HK Citizen podcast. Today on This Week Unpacked, we're diving straight into a collection of our recent reports from hkcitizen.net. As your fellow journalists here at HK Citizen, we've distilled the key insights from these articles to offer you a comprehensive look at some of the most significant stories shaping the news right now, all without overwhelming you with, unnecessary detail. Think of this as your informed shortcut.
Indeed. On this edition of This Week Unpacked, we aim to unpack a rather significant series of developments that we've been following closely. We'll be examining the recent 80th anniversary commemorations of VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day, and the enduring legacy of the Cold War, the remarkably swift implementation of new national security subsidiary laws in Hong Kong, ongoing concerns surrounding the Foreign Correspondents Club and the UK Labour government's newly published immigration white paper, and its potential ramifications for those holding BNO visas. Quite a lot to get through.
And there's more. We'll also be taking a look at the recent London Underground blackout, which certainly caused a bit of a kerfuffle for commuters, and the worryingly low levels of UK reservoirs alongside the broader fears of drought across the continent. Right then, shall we get cracking?
Let's begin by casting our minds back to a truly pivotal moment in history, the 80th anniversary of VE Day. The United Kingdom recently held nationwide ceremonies from the 5th to the 8th of May, marking 8 decades since Nazi Germany's surrender on the 8th of May, 1945.
It was such a powerful symbol, wasn't it? VE Day marked the end of the Second World War in Europe and really highlighted British resilience in the face of, well, unimaginable adversity. You can just picture the scenes in London Churchill's momentous radio announcement echoing out, and then those incredible celebrations in Trafalgar Square and outside Buckingham Palace.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember the significant contributions Britain made to that victory. From the Battle of Britain and the Blitz to the absolutely vital Battle of the Atlantic, the sheer heroism of the Royal Air Force, the groundbreaking code-breaking work at Bletchley Park, and the immense contributions of women in factories and auxiliary roles, it truly was a national effort that demanded sacrifice from so many.
But as you mentioned in the intro, that euphoria didn't last, did it? It was quite rapidly followed by the dawn of the Cold War, which really dominated the latter half of the 20th century and, continues to shape our world in many ways.
Quite right. The period from 1947 to 1991 witnessed that intense ideological divide between capitalism and democracy, largely championed by the United States and the UK, and communism, promoted by the Soviet Union. Churchill's famous Iron Curtain speech in 1946 really brought that new reality into sharp focus.
Yeah, that speech really set the tone.
It did. And the failure of the Yalta and Potsdam conferences in 1945 to effectively resolve post-war issues ultimately led to the division of Germany, which became a central fault line in the Cold War.
And it's rather interesting to note that even now, as we look ahead to the full 80th anniversary events next year in 2025, the planning seems very mindful of both the Second World War and its rather complex Cold War aftermath.
Precisely. The events planned for next year include a significant military parade in London, featuring aircraft from the Royal Air Force and the Red Arrows, which will undoubtedly be quite a spectacle.
Always impressive, the Red Arrows.
They are. King Charles is also set to host a tea party for WWII veterans, which is, a lovely gesture of remembrance. There will be a national service at Westminster Abbey, beacon lightings across the country, the ringing of church bells, and peace pledges. And crucially, there's a real emphasis on engaging younger generations with this history, using the hashtag VEDay80 on X to share historical stories and ensure these lessons are not forgotten.
That focus on younger generations is key, isn't it?
Absolutely. Perhaps we can reflect on how the memory of WWII and the Cold War continues to shape current geopolitical thinking in Britain. For instance, debates around defense spending and international alliances often draw on lessons from these periods.
It certainly makes you think about the lasting impact the Cold War had on Britain. It wasn't just about international relations, was it? It really seeped into all aspects of life here at home.
Indeed. Politically and internationally, Britain was a co-founder of NATO in 1949, becoming a key ally in containing Soviet expansionism. The UK also developed nuclear weapons, conducting its first test in 1952, which significantly shaped its diplomatic standing on the global stage.
And the nuclear deterrent is still central to UK defense policy today.
Exactly. Interestingly, the Cold War also hastened the process of decolonization, with countries like India in 1947 and Malaysia in 1957 gaining their independence, partly influenced by the shifting global power dynamics. And domestically, Cold War ideology heavily influenced political debates between the Labour and Conservative parties. as well as the activities of MI5 encountering perceived communist threats within the UK.
And what about economically and technologically?
Well, the U.S.-funded Marshall Plan played a crucial role in Britain's post-war economic recovery. The Cold War also spurred significant advancements in military technology, such as jet fighters and missile systems. And the computing innovations that came out of Bletchley Park had a lasting impact on the development of modern computing.
But the arms race must have been a huge drain economically.
It was. It did place considerable economic strains on the country, arguably contributing to the period of economic stagnation in the 1970s.
And on a social and cultural level, I suppose that era really gave rise to a whole genre of spy fiction, didn't it? Think of James Bond.
Absolutely. The espionage culture of the Cold War, perhaps best epitomized by the iconic James Bond, became deeply ingrained in British popular culture. Immigration from Eastern European and Commonwealth nations during this period also significantly increased Britain's diversity, enriching the social fabric of the nation.
And the anti-war movements too, like C&D.
Yes, the pervasive fear of nuclear war led to the rise of influential anti-war movements like the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, or C&D, founded back in 1958.
And even though the Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, its legacies are still very much with us today.
They certainly are. Institutions like NATO, existing nuclear weapons policies, and established intelligence networks all have their roots in the strategic thinking of the Cold War. It's quite striking how parallels are being drawn between that era and the current geopolitical tensions, particularly the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
It's a rather sobering thought, and it was King Charles, speaking at Westminster Abbey during the recent commemorations, who really brought that connection into focus, highlighting that achieving and maintaining peace requires both courage and unity, and that the lessons learned during the Cold War remain relevant in today's complex and, well, often volatile world.
Turning our attention now to a more recent development that we've been covering for hkcitizen.net, we need to discuss the remarkably swift implementation of new national security subsidiary laws in Hong Kong. These pieces of legislation were tabled, passed by the Legislative Council, LegCo, gazetted, and brought into force within a mere 48 hours on the 12th of May.
48 hours. That's an extraordinarily rapid turnaround, even by legislative standards. What exactly is the stated aim of these new laws?
According to government statements, the aim is to streamline operations for Hong Kong's Office for Safeguarding National Security. The key provisions include an expansion of jurisdiction, granting the office the direct power to initiate, investigate, and detain suspects in cases involving alleged foreign interference, and perhaps most significantly, the authority to transfer these individuals to mainland China for trial.
That's a rather significant expansion of power, isn't it? Especially that provision regarding transfers to the mainland.
It is indeed. Furthermore, the legislation mandates that all government departments and civil servants in Hong Kong must fully cooperate with the National Security Office and maintain strict confidentiality regarding its operations.
Right. And what about the office's premises?
In addition, the office's premises are now designated as prohibited places, meaning they are exempt from searches, inspections, or seizures by local law enforcement during operations.
So it essentially grants the National Security Office a very high degree of operational autonomy, free from typical local oversight. What has been the official justification put forward for these rather sweeping changes?
The Secretary for Justice, Paul Lam SC, has described these laws as technical in nature, asserting that their sole purpose is to enhance the efficiency of the National Security Office without actually expanding the scope of its existing powers under the broader Hong Kong national security law.
Technical in nature.
He has emphasized that these subsidiary laws are simply intended to align with the existing framework and are crucial for effectively safeguarding national security.
But given the sheer speed at which this legislation was pushed through the LegCo, it sounds as though there have been some rather significant concerns raised about the legislative process itself.
Absolutely. The entire legislative process was remarkably swift, completed in under 2 days, with no opportunity for public consultation whatsoever. Discussions within LegCo were held behind closed doors, involving only a select group of pro-establishment lawmakers.
Behind closed doors?
Yes. We understand that some legislators received the draft legislation just hours before they were expected to deliberate and vote on it, leaving virtually no time for proper scrutiny or consideration of potential implications.
That lack of transparency and the rushed nature of the process have understandably caused considerable unease among legal experts in Hong Kong, haven't they?
They certainly have. Professor Chan from the University of Hong Kong, who understandably wished to remain anonymous given the sensitivity of the issue, but commented that Even for what are described as technical amendments, rushing through such potentially significant laws in record time inevitably raises suspicions that there may have been a deliberate effort to avoid public scrutiny and debate.
You can see why people might think that. And what are the broader concerns being voiced regarding the potential implications of these new laws and the rather unorthodox manner in which they were enacted?
There's a very real fear that this rapid enactment could establish a precedent for fast-tracking other national security measures. Most notably, the long-debated Article 23 legislation under the Basic Law, which covers offenses such as subversion and secession.
Ah, yes, Article 23. That's always been controversial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Given the current political landscape in Hong Kong, where pro-government lawmakers hold a dominant majority and dissenting voices have been largely marginalized, there's a significant concern that a similar blitz approach could be employed to pass Article 23 with minimal public or legislative resistance.
That would certainly be a worrying development for the rule of law in Hong Kong.
Indeed. Even more concerning is the potential that this rushed legislative model could be applied to non-security-related laws as well. Sensitive bills concerning areas like privacy, data regulation, or economic policy could conceivably be fast-tracked under the guise of urgency or technicality.
Thereby bypassing essential public debate.
Precisely. And potentially leading to significant long-term problems for Hong Kong's governance and its citizens' rights. A spokesperson for Hong Kong Democracy Watch warned that legislation enacted without proper scrutiny not only undermines fundamental democratic processes, but also significantly increases the risk of policy blunders that could ultimately damage Hong Kong's global reputation as a stable and predictable international hub.
And the provision allowing for the transfer of suspects to mainland China for trial is a particularly sensitive point, isn't it? Especially concerning the long-standing principles of Hong Kong's independent judicial system.
It is a deeply sensitive issue. Hong Kong's common law system is built upon fundamental principles of transparency, procedural fairness, and an independent judiciary. The ability of the National Security Office to bypass local courts in certain national security cases poses a significant challenge to these core principles.
So how does that potentially undermine things?
Well, senior barrister Mr. Lee, who also preferred to remain anonymous, cautioned that if an increasing number of national security cases are diverted away from Hong Kong's own judicial processes, it could severely erode public confidence in the rule of law, particularly given the National Security Office's broad discretion in classifying cases as involving foreign interference.
Right, that broad discretion is key.
And the complete absence of open debate during this rushed legislative process further obscures how national security considerations will be balanced with the autonomy of Hong Kong's judiciary, potentially undermining its standing as a trusted global financial center.
And the increased operational freedom that has been granted to the National Security Office, without any apparent new or strengthened oversight mechanisms, is another key area of concern for many observers.
Precisely. As a mainland Chinese agency, the National Security Office already operates with a considerable degree of autonomy from Hong Kong's existing judicial and administrative frameworks. While the National Security Law does establish a supervisory committee, the fact that its members are appointed by the chief executive naturally raises questions about its independence and its effectiveness in providing genuine and impartial oversight.
So the oversight itself might lack independence.
That's the concern. Dr. Chung, a legal academic who also preferred to remain anonymous, pointed out that the office's designation as a prohibited place and its immunity from searches by local law enforcement further diminish any external accountability. Coupled with the highly secretive legislative process we've discussed, it becomes exceedingly difficult for the public to have any meaningful way of assessing whether these very significant powers are being used appropriately and within the bounds of the law.
And it's not just about the National Security Office itself, is it? The new laws also place Hong Kong's civil servants in a potentially rather difficult and ethically challenging position.
That's quite right. The mandate requiring civil servants to comply unquestioningly with the National Security Office, without clear and robust legal safeguards against potentially improper or unlawful directives, creates a significant ethical and legal quandary for them.
The real bind for them.
Absolutely. If this pattern of rushed legislation without proper checks and balances, such as genuinely independent oversight bodies or transparent accountability mechanisms, continues, particularly with regard to the implementation of Article 23 or other sensitive laws, the expansion of unchecked power and the erosion of judicial integrity could pose a profound and potentially irreversible challenge to Hong Kong's long-cherished rule of law.
So, what has been the official response from the Hong Kong government to these fairly widespread criticisms?
A government spokesperson has stated that matters pertaining to national security demand swift and decisive action, and that the entire legislative process adhered fully to all applicable legal requirements.
And they mentioned public engagement.
They have also issued assurances of ongoing public engagement to find an appropriate balance between legitimate security concerns and the protection of civil liberties.
But analysts, as we've seen in our reporting for hkcitizen.net, seem less than entirely convinced by these assurances, don't they?
Indeed. Many analysts who have spoken to us warn that in the current political climate in Hong Kong, genuine avenues for meaningful public participation in the crucial lawmaking process have been significantly curtailed. They suggest that if this pattern of rushed legislation becomes the norm, especially when coupled with continued pressure on judicial independence and a lack of robust checks and balances on executive power, Hong Kong's fundamental legal foundations and its international standing as a reliable and predictable jurisdiction could face unprecedented and very serious risks.
And Article 23 is the one to watch.
The progress, or indeed the lack thereof, on the implementation of Article 23 in the coming months will likely serve as a crucial litmus test of the government's broader legislative strategy, its genuine approach to oversight mechanisms, and its fundamental commitment to maintaining judicial integrity.
Let's now turn our attention to the Foreign Correspondents Club in Hong Kong and the ongoing and rather persistent concerns surrounding the state of press freedom in the city. Our recent reporting on hkcitizen.net highlights a new wave of controversy following the FCC's latest press freedom survey.
Yes, this survey, which was conducted in April of this year, has really stirred things up quite considerably. It paints a rather concerning picture of a deteriorating media environment in Hong Kong, with a significant majority of respondents reporting a worsening situation over the past 2 years. Widespread self-censorship among journalists due to perceived legal risks associated with reporting on sensitive topics.
That's a worrying sign, self-censorship.
It is. And a notable number of foreign correspondents actively considering leaving the city altogether as a direct result of these increasing pressures. The survey explicitly links these challenges to the implementation of the 2020 National Security Law and the more recent 2023 Article 23 legislation.
Unsurprisingly, that survey hasn't exactly been met with universal approval, has it?
That's rather an understatement. The pro-establishment camp and pro-government media outlets such as Ta Kung Pao and Wenwei Po have launched a rather strong and coordinated backlash against the FCC's findings.
What do they say?
They've dismissed the survey as unrepresentative due to its sample size, accused the FCC of deliberately smearing Hong Kong's image on the international stage, and suggested that the survey is simply catering to Western anti-China sentiment.
And the government's position?
The Hong Kong government has reiterated its long-standing stance that press freedom is indeed fully safeguarded under the Basic Law, but crucially, within the overarching framework of national security. And they've accused the FCC of intentionally misleading the public with its survey findings.
And Beijing.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry's Commissioner's Office in Hong Kong went even further in its condemnation, accusing the FCC of sowing discord within the city and demanding that it cease what they consider to be unwarranted interference in Hong Kong's internal affairs.
But the FCC, to its credit, is standing firmly by the findings of its survey, aren't they?
Absolutely. The president of the FCC, Lee Williamson, has publicly defended the survey and its methodology, stating unequivocally that it accurately reflects the genuine and increasing difficulties faced by journalists working in Hong Kong today. He underscored the fundamental importance of both press freedom and the rule of law to the city's continued prosperity and its international reputation.
Good for him for standing firm.
He has also affirmed the FCC's unwavering commitment to continuing to advocate for the rights and safety of journalists operating in Hong Kong. They have also received strong support from Reporters Without Borders, who have pointed to Hong Kong's alarming and precipitous drop in their global press freedom ranking to a dismal 140th in 2025, which they classify as a red zone, indicating a very serious situation for media freedom.
140th. That's a shocking fall. This current controversy seems to rather powerfully echo previous tensions, particularly the 2018 incident, involving the invitation extended to Andy Chan of the Hong Kong National Party and the subsequent rather controversial visa denial of Victor Mallet. That whole affair still casts a rather long shadow over the media landscape in Hong Kong, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Those events back in 2018 really marked a significant turning point, starkly highlighting the growing pressure on press freedom in Hong Kong and having quite significant and long-lasting repercussions, not only for the FCC itself, but also for the broader media landscape and indeed for Hong Kong standing on the international stage.
Remind us briefly about the key events that unfolded back in 2018.
In August 2018, the Foreign Correspondents Club extended an invitation to Andy Chan, who at the time was the convener of the Hong Kong National Party, to speak at its clubhouse. The topic of his planned address was Hong Kong nationalism, a case for independence under colonial oppression.
Right. Advocating independence, that was always going to be inflammatory.
Exactly. Now, it's important to recall that the Hong Kong National Party openly and publicly advocated for Hong Kong independence and was already facing the very real prospect of a government ban due to its political activities. Therefore, the FCC's decision to provide a platform to Mr. Chan was viewed by many, both within Hong Kong and in Beijing, as a direct challenge to the clearly defined red lines of both the central and local authorities.
That invitation certainly sparked quite a strong reaction at the time, as I recall.
It most certainly did. The Chinese Foreign Ministry's Commissioner's Office in Hong Kong immediately issued a strong demand that the FCC cancel the planned event, arguing vehemently that advocating for Hong Kong independence was a clear violation of the basic law and the fundamental one country, two systems principle.
And the Hong Kong government.
The then chief executive of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, publicly criticized the FCC's decision as inappropriate. And the pro-establishment media in Hong Kong went into overdrive, accusing the FCC of deliberately provoking Beijing and providing a platform for separatism, which were very serious accusations indeed.
And Victor Mallet, who was serving as the FCC's vice president at the time, played a rather key role in publicly defending the club's decision to host the speech, didn't he?
He did. Victor Mallet, who also held the position of Asia News editor for the Financial Times at the time, defended the FCC's decision by firmly stressing that the club's fundamental mission was to foster open discussion and the free exchange of ideas, and that extending an invitation to a speaker did not in any way equate to the FCC endorsing their particular views or political agenda.
And despite the significant political pressure, the speech by Andy Chan ultimately went ahead. But there were quite significant consequences for Mr. Mallet personally, weren't there?
Yes, the controversial speech took place as scheduled on August 14, 2018. Then, just 2 months later, in a move that sent shockwaves through the international journalistic community, Mr. Mallet's application to renew his standard work visa was unexpectedly rejected by the Hong Kong Immigration Department, without any official explanation being provided whatsoever, effectively forcing him to leave the city within a week of the decision.
No explanation given at all.
None officially. This was very widely interpreted as a direct act of retaliation by the authorities against the FCC for having hosted Andy Chan's speech, and marked the first time since the 1997 handover of Hong Kong to China that a foreign journalist had been expelled from the city due to a visa-related issue. It really sent a stark message about the changing media environment in Hong Kong.
And that rather abrupt visa denial had some pretty significant and lasting impacts, didn't it? Both on the media and on Hong Kong's international reputation.
Indeed. It significantly eroded the climate of press freedom in Hong Kong, creating a tangible chilling effect on journalists working in the city, who began to fear that covering politically sensitive topics or offering critical perspectives could jeopardize their all-important visas, inevitably leading to increased levels of self-censorship within the media.
The chilling effect is always hard to measure, but clearly felt.
Very much so. The Hong Kong Journalists Association, among others, noted a discernible increase in the pressure being exerted on local journalists as well. As we've discussed, Hong Kong's ranking in the globally recognized reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index has plummeted quite dramatically since then. And the Victor Mallet case is very frequently cited as a key example of increasing government suppression of dissenting voices and the erosion of media independence.
It also seemed to seriously undermine confidence in Hong Kong as a reliable and welcoming hub for international media organizations.
Absolutely. Major international news outlets began to reassess the operational risks of maintaining a significant presence in Hong Kong. For example, the prestigious New York Times made the decision to relocate a significant portion of its Asia operations from Hong Kong to Seoul in South Korea in 2019, explicitly citing growing concerns over the increasingly restrictive media environment in Hong Kong as a key factor in their decision.
A big move for the NYT.
It was. A subsequent survey conducted by the FCC in 2021 indicated that nearly 30% of foreign journalists based in Hong Kong were actively considering leaving the city. due to concerns about visa issues and their personal safety, which really underscores the weakening of Hong Kong's role as a vibrant global news hub.
And the FCC itself has faced noticeably increased constraints on its operations and activities since that 2018 incident, hasn't it?
Yes, the Mallet incident really placed the FCC squarely in the crosshairs of increased scrutiny from both the Hong Kong government and various pro-establishment figures. Subsequent FCC activities, such as the publication of their regular press freedom surveys and the holding of their annual Human Rights Press Awards, have faced relentless criticism and pressure.
And the least changes.
In 2022, the terms of the FCC's long-standing clubhouse lease were amended to include specific national security clauses. And internally, the club has reportedly begun exercising a greater degree of caution in its operations, including making the difficult decision to suspend the Human Rights Press Awards in 2022 and requiring legal reviews for public statements in 2023.
That shows real pressure.
These actions rather clearly reflect the lasting psychological and practical impact of the Mallet case and the broader pressures on free expression in Hong Kong.
And internationally, that incident certainly didn't do Hong Kong's international reputation any favors at all, did it?
No, it drew widespread condemnation from governments and international bodies across the globe, including strong statements from the United States, the United Kingdom, the European Union, and Canada. The U.S. State Department specifically warned that the visa denial undermined Hong Kong's reputation as an open society, while the UK Foreign Office publicly described it as a clear erosion of free speech.
Damaging assessments.
This incident significantly fueled international perceptions that Hong Kong's promised autonomy under the one country, two systems framework was rapidly diminishing, which has undoubtedly had a knock-on effect on investor confidence in the city, with some businesses reportedly considering or actually relocating regional headquarters to alternative locations such as Singapore, partly due to concerns about Hong Kong's evolving media and legal environment.
And the tensions between the Foreign Correspondents Club and the pro-establishment camp haven't really eased in any significant way since 2018, have they?
No, there have been a series of ongoing clashes and points of friction. We've seen controversies surrounding changes to media accreditation policies in 2020, further strong condemnation of subsequent FCC press freedom surveys by government officials, and the aforementioned suspension of the Human Rights Press Awards in 2022, all of which underscore the continued and often rather acrimonious relationship between the FCC and the authorities in Hong Kong.
It's worth remembering the FCC's rather long and storied history in Hong Kong, isn't it?
Indeed. Founded originally in Chongqing back in 1943 and relocating to Hong Kong in 1949, the FCC boasts a long and distinguished history as a vital hub for journalists reporting on China and the wider Asian region. Its core mission has always been to provide a platform for professional exchange among journalists, to actively promote and defend press freedom, and to provide essential support for the often challenging work of foreign correspondents.
And it's become more of a watchdog since the handover.
Since the 1997 handover of sovereignty, the FCC has increasingly taken on a crucial role in monitoring and publicly commenting on the state of press freedom in Hong Kong, regularly issuing reports and hosting discussions on politically sensitive topics, which, as we've clearly seen, has increasingly led to accusations from the pro-establishment camp of the club acting as a so-called foreign agent.
So looking at the current situation, what would you say are the key challenges that the Foreign Correspondents Club is facing right now in Hong Kong?
The FCC is currently grappling with a number of very significant challenges, including increasing visa restrictions for foreign journalists seeking to work in Hong Kong, heightened scrutiny of any events they plan to hold at their premises, and the growing pressure on both foreign and local journalists that is unfortunately leading to a discernible increase in internal self-censorship.
A tough environment.
Very much so. The lingering shadow of the 2018 Andy Chan incident and the subsequent Victor Mallet visa row continues to shape the operational environment in which they must now operate.
Let's shift our focus now to the United Kingdom and the recently unveiled immigration white paper from the Labour government. This seems to have generated quite a bit of discussion and concern, particularly for those individuals from Hong Kong who have come to the UK under the British National Overseas, or BNO, visa scheme.
It certainly has. The 2025 Immigration White Paper, which was officially unveiled by the Labour government, puts forward some quite significant proposals aimed at achieving a rather drastic reduction in net migration to the UK within the next 4 years.
And what are some of the key proposals outlined in this white paper that are causing the most concern among BNO visa holders and other immigrant communities?
Two key proposals in particular have generated the most significant level of concern and indeed considerable anxiety. The first is the proposed extension of the period that individuals must legally reside in the UK before becoming eligible to apply for permanent residency, also known as indefinite leave to remain, or ILR, from the current 5 years to a full 10 years.
Doubling the wait time for ILR, that's huge.
It is. The second major point of contention is a proposed raising of the minimum English language proficiency requirements for those seeking to obtain ILR.
And this has a very direct and potentially quite significant impact on the approximately 140,000 individuals from Hong Kong who have come to the United Kingdom since the introduction of the BNO visa scheme in 2021, hasn't it? Many of these individuals made the move to the UK largely based on the understanding of the so-called 5+1 pathway to settlement.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
These individuals made the significant decision to migrate to the UK with the clear understanding that they would be eligible to apply for indefinite leave to remain after 5 years of continuous residency, and subsequently to apply for British citizenship after an additional year.
The 5+1 pathway?
Exactly. This widely publicized 5+1 pathway was undoubtedly a key motivating factor for a great many Hong Kongers in their decision to relocate to the UK and rebuild their lives here. Now, the prospect of potentially having to wait a full 10 years before being able to apply for permanent residency has understandably caused considerable alarm and a deep sense of distress among this community.
The proposed 10-year rule seems particularly concerning, especially when coupled with the additional requirement to prove that applicants have made significant and lasting contributions to the UK. That sounds rather vague and potentially quite difficult for many people to have evidence to the satisfaction of the Home Office.
It is indeed. The specific requirement to convincingly demonstrate significant and lasting contributions to the UK's economy and wider society is formulated in rather broad terms and has already sparked considerable outrage and concern among various established immigrant communities in the UK, who understandably fear that it could be used as a mechanism to unfairly exclude many deserving individuals from securing permanent residency.
And while the immigration white paper does specifically mention those who have come to the UK on BNO visas, it doesn't really offer much in the way of specific clarification or reassurance regarding their situation, does it? It only rather vaguely hints at a potential increase in the level of English language proficiency that will be required for BNO holders to obtain ILR.
That's precisely right. While the white paper does make a passing acknowledgement of the existence of the special BNO visa scheme for Hong Kongers, it remains conspicuously vague on exactly how these significant new proposals will specifically affect individuals holding these visas. The only concrete indication provided in the document is a suggestion that the minimum English language proficiency requirement for BNO holders applying for ILR could potentially be raised from the current B1 level to the more advanced B2 level.
B1 to B2, okay.
The notable lack of clarity on other crucial aspects of the proposals has only served to exacerbate the already significant levels of uncertainty and anxiety felt by BNO visa holders across the UK.
So, what could be the potential consequences for these BNO visa holders currently residing in the UK if these proposals are ultimately implemented in their current form?
The potential impact could be quite devastating for a significant number of BNO visa holders who've made the UK their new home. A mandatory 10-year wait for eligibility for permanent residency could impose very significant financial strains, particularly on those individuals and families who have limited financial resources or who have faced challenges in securing stable employment in the UK.
And it affects rights, too.
It would also restrict their access to important fundamental rights and essential public benefits, such as the right to vote in general elections and full access to the UK's social welfare system, for a considerably longer period than they had originally anticipated when they made the move. Various advocacy groups representing Hong Kongers in the UK have already publicly described these proposals as yet another betrayal of the promises made to those who came to the UK seeking refuge and a more secure future following the political changes in Hong Kong.
Another betrayal. Strong words, recalling past history.
Very much so. Comparisons are inevitably being drawn to the feeling of being let down around the 1997 handover.
The white paper does make some brief mention of the UK's ongoing commitment to providing humanitarian support for both Hong Kong and Ukraine, but the distinct lack of any clear and specific exemptions for BNO visa holders from these much more restrictive new immigration rules seems to have created a very real crisis of trust between the government and the Hong Kong community in the UK.
That's a very astute observation. While the white paper does indeed make a brief reference to the UK's stated commitment to continuing to provide humanitarian support for individuals fleeing persecution and instability in both Hong Kong and Ukraine, The complete absence of any explicit exemptions for BNO visa holders from these newly proposed and significantly more restrictive immigration rules has indeed led to a palpable and deeply concerning erosion of trust between the government and the Hong Kong community that is settled in the UK. Many BNO holders now feel that the promises and assurances that were given by the UK government when the special BNO visa scheme was initially launched are now being unfairly and unilaterally undermined.
There have also been some rather pointed accusations made that the Labour government, in putting forward these proposals, is essentially pandering to the often quite hardline anti-immigration rhetoric espoused by political parties such as Reform UK.
Yes, there has been considerable criticism from various quarters suggesting that the Labour government's unexpectedly tough stance on immigration, as outlined in this recent white paper, bears a rather striking resemblance to some of the more radical policy positions that were prominently advocated by Reform UK during the previous general election campaign.
What did Reform UK propose?
Reform UK had campaigned on explicit promises to drastically cut overall net migration to the UK and to adopt a much tougher approach to immigration enforcement and border control. The Labour government's new proposals, which include a target to significantly cut net migration, to potentially scrap care worker visas, and to implement swifter deportation processes, do appear to align with some of Reform UK's key policy objectives in this area.
In the white paper's apparent approach of applying these rather sweeping blanket rules to both individuals who have entered the UK legally and those who have entered illegally has also drawn a fair amount of criticism, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Many critics have voiced significant concerns regarding the white paper's seemingly indiscriminate approach, which appears to apply the proposed 10-year rule for ILR and the new points-based assessment system quite broadly, without clearly distinguishing between those individuals who have entered the UK through legal and established routes, such as BNO visa holders, and those who have entered the country illegally.
So it risks stigmatizing legal migrants.
There's a strong prevailing sentiment that this somewhat undifferentiated approach unfairly stigmatizes legal newcomers, such as those who have come from Hong Kong on BNO visas, by implicitly associating them with the issue of illegal immigration and the often negative narrative of being a so-called resource drain on the UK.
This whole situation seems to have brought back some rather painful historical memories for many people from Hong Kong, particularly in relation to the controversial British Nationality Act of the 1980s.
Indeed. The proposals outlined in this recent white paper have chillingly resurrected some very painful memories for many Hong Kongers, particularly those relating to the British Nationality Act of 1981, a piece of legislation that is still widely viewed by many in Hong Kong as a profound historical betrayal by the British government.
What did that act do again?
That particular act effectively stripped millions of Hong Kongers of their full British citizenship and the fundamental right to reside in the United Kingdom. Despite their long and deep historical ties to Britain through decades of colonial rule, the subsequent creation of the British national overseas status at the time offered a degree of consular protection, but crucially did not grant the right to live or work in the UK. This deeply felt historical context of having previously felt abandoned by Britain is very much coloring the current reaction to the Labour government's immigration white paper among the Hong Kong community in the UK.
So there's a very real sense of déjà vu for many BNO holders, a fear that they are once again being marginalized for what are perceived to be short-term domestic political considerations within the UK.
That's precisely the prevailing sentiment. The parallels between what many Hong Kongers perceive as the prioritization of UK domestic political considerations over the UK's moral and historical commitments to the people of Hong Kong in the 1981 Act, and the potential long-term implications of the 2025 Immigration White Paper are stark and deeply troubling for many. There's a very palpable fear among BNO visa holders that they are yet again being treated as mere political pawns, and that they risk reliving that very same sense of marginalization and profound insecurity that they experienced in the often fraught lead-up to the 1997 handover of Hong Kong.
The white paper also rather vaguely hints at a potential broader overhaul of the UK's nationality laws, doesn't it?
Yes. While the immigration white paper doesn't explicitly propose any immediate or radical changes to the overarching British nationality law, its rather cryptic references to reforming citizenship criteria and updating the life in the UK test, who do strongly suggest that further tightening of the requirements for obtaining full British citizenship could well be on the horizon.
More uncertainty down the line.
This potential for a more comprehensive overhaul of nationality laws adds yet another layer of uncertainty and concern for BNO visa holders, who have long-term aspirations of eventually securing full British citizenship.
And in the more immediate term, we've already seen a rather significant hike in various visa application fees, which will undoubtedly add to the already considerable financial burden on those seeking to remain in the UK through legal channels.
That's quite right. Visa application fees across various categories have already seen a substantial increase since April of this year, making applications for indefinite leave to remain and other crucial immigration statuses more expensive than ever before.
And combined with other changes.
This recent increase, when considered alongside the proposed implementation of a new points-based system for assessing eligibility for ILR, which will likely evaluate applicants based on factors such as their English language proficiency, their skills and qualifications, and their perceived economic impact on the UK, and the government's stated intention to scrap care worker visas, collectively signals a clear and concerning move towards a significantly more restrictive and potentially less welcoming overall immigration system in the United Kingdom.
With the government setting a rather ambitious target of slashing net migration by such a significant figure, within a relatively short 4-year time frame, it certainly seems like a period of considerable challenge and uncertainty for many individuals and families who have chosen to build their lives here in the UK.
Indeed. The stated target of reducing overall net migration by a substantial 100,000 individuals within just 4 years is undoubtedly ambitious, and the Immigration White Paper outlines further plans for implementing swifter deportation processes and for closing what the government terms human rights loopholes in order to facilitate removals, underscoring the government's determination to meet this rather challenging target.
So, lots of public concern.
This has understandably led to widespread public concern and a great deal of anxiety and uncertainty about the future for many immigrants currently residing in the UK, including the significant number of BNO visa holders who have come from Hong Kong. The Home Office has indicated that further detailed reforms will be implemented by the autumn. And various Hong Kong advocacy groups in the UK have pledged to closely scrutinize the forthcoming legislation and to vigorously fight for the rights and interests of BNO visa holders.
Okay, let's now turn our attention to a more immediate and rather disruptive event that occurred recently. The major power outage that unexpectedly hit the London Underground network. That certainly caused a considerable amount of chaos and disruption for a great many people in the capital, didn't it?
It most certainly did. On the 12th of May, a significant and widespread power outage, which was reportedly triggered by a fire at a key electricity substation located in southwest London, brought a large portion of the London Underground network and some overground train services to a complete and abrupt standstill.
A complete standstill, wow.
Tens of thousands of commuters were left stranded at stations and on trains, and the incident really served to highlight the inherent vulnerability of critical infrastructure systems here in the UK.
It sounds as though it was a pretty widespread disruption, affecting several key and heavily used tube lines.
Yes. The Bakerloo, Jubilee, Northern, Waterloo and City, and the relatively new Elizabeth lines were all significantly impacted by the power failure. There were reports of rather frantic and at times chaotic evacuations taking place at major central London stations such as Paddington and Tottenham Court Road. And some passengers even reported being trapped on stationary trains inside tunnels for a number of hours, which must have been a rather distressing experience for those involved.
Trapped in tunnels. Nightmare scenario. The timing of the power outage couldn't have been much worse either, occurring right in the middle of the afternoon peak rush hour.
Absolutely. The power outage occurred at approximately 2:48 p.m., which was precisely when the afternoon peak rush hour was beginning to gather momentum. This unfortunate timing led to scenes of massive overcrowding at many underground stations and placed an enormous strain on the already busy bus network as stranded commuters desperately sought alternative ways to get home.
Were tickets accepted on buses?
While Transport for London, or TfL, did announce that underground tickets would be accepted on bus services. The significant disruption on the Bakerloo and Jubilee lines continued well into the late evening, leaving many commuters understandably frustrated and delayed in their journeys.
Sadly, this isn't really an isolated incident when it comes to power failures affecting critical infrastructure in the UK, is it? We've seen similar significant problems occurring at major airports relatively recently.
That's quite right. Just recently, on the 21st of March, a fire at an electricity substation in the Hayes area of West London caused a major 16-hour-long shutdown at Heathrow Airport, leading to the cancellation of well over 1,000 flights and leaving hundreds of thousands of air travelers stranded and facing significant disruption to their travel plans.
16 hours at Heathrow. Incredible.
Yeah. And just a few days before the London Underground blackout on the 9th of May, Manchester Airport's Terminal 3 experienced a sudden and unexpected power failure that crippled its essential passport control systems, causing considerable delays and frustration for arriving international passengers. These recurring incidents are definitely raising some serious questions about the overall resilience and reliability of the UK's critical infrastructure networks.
And naturally, whenever a major incident like this occurs, speculation about the underlying cause inevitably starts to circulate. And the possibility of cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure is often mentioned in these discussions nowadays. Was there any suggestion that this might have been the cause of the recent tube blackout?
Given the increasing frequency and boldness of sophisticated cyber attacks targeting public utilities and other critical infrastructure around the world, including some recent high-profile ransomware and data theft attacks on major UK department stores, speculation about a potential cyber attack on the London power network was indeed present in some quarters.
And attacks on utilities are rising.
It's worth noting that in 2024 alone, utility companies in the UK reported a significant surge in the number of successful cyber attacks compared to previous years, highlighting the growing threat. Cybersecurity experts have repeatedly warned about the potential for malicious actors to target essential infrastructure, such as power grids and water supply systems, which could have absolutely catastrophic consequences for large urban populations.
But what have been the official findings so far from the investigations into the cause of the London Underground blackout?
Both the National Grid, which manages the electricity transmission network, and Transport for London have issued initial statements, indicating that preliminary investigations point towards a failure of equipment at the affected electricity substation as the most likely primary cause, rather than a deliberate cyber attack, although it's important to note that detailed investigations are still actively ongoing.
So, equipment failure, not necessarily a cyber attack.
That's the initial finding. However, cybersecurity experts caution that increasingly digitized power systems are becoming more and more vulnerable to sophisticated cyber threats. It's also a relevant point that a significant percentage of the UK's electricity substations currently rely on equipment that is already over 40 years old.
Over 40 years old. That's concerning.
Which naturally increases the inherent risk of mechanical breakdowns and failures. Additionally, the ongoing and necessary shift towards integrating more intermittent renewable energy sources, like wind and solar power, into the national grid introduces its own set of technical challenges in terms of maintaining overall grid stability, particularly when interfacing with older existing infrastructure.
So there's a real and perhaps growing concern about the UK's overall ability to effectively withstand a coordinated and sophisticated cyber attack, targeting its critical utilities infrastructure, especially given the acknowledged issue of aging physical infrastructure in some sectors.
There is indeed a significant and increasing level of concern. While the National Cybersecurity Center, or NCSC, is providing enhanced support and guidance to utility companies in strengthening their cyber defenses, and a forthcoming cybersecurity and resilience bill aims to improve incident reporting and overall preparedness. The underlying issues of aging infrastructure in some sectors, recognized shortage of skilled cybersecurity professionals, and potential weaknesses within complex supply chains all remain as significant vulnerabilities that need to be urgently addressed.
And the potential cost is huge.
Some industry studies have estimated that a major and sustained cyber attack on London's power network, for example, could have a devastating economic impact, potentially costing in the region of $111 million per day and directly affecting the lives of up to 1.5 million people.
And as if the power-related issues weren't concerning enough, we're also facing significant and growing water scarcity issues in parts of the UK, which adds another concerning layer to the whole question of national infrastructure, security, and resilience.
That's quite right. Several water companies in England have recently issued warnings regarding historically low levels in their reservoirs, particularly in the southeast, following a prolonged period of unusually dry weather.
And cyber attacks on water systems, too.
Worryingly, there were also concerning reports of a number of cyber attacks specifically targeting drinking water supply systems in the UK during 2024, raising fears that malicious actors could potentially exploit vulnerabilities to exacerbate the ongoing water crisis by disrupting essential water treatment processes or manipulating supply networks. Water companies are in a rather difficult position, needing to embrace digitalization to improve efficiency and monitoring, but also grappling with significant challenges of aging pipe networks and pumping stations, as well as considerable funding constraints for essential upgrades and maintenance.
The recent infrastructure incidents have understandably sparked a degree of political outrage, with various voices calling for urgent action to thoroughly address the identified vulnerabilities in our national infrastructure.
Absolutely. Politicians from across the political spectrum, as well as energy analysts and infrastructure experts, have voiced strong concerns following these recent incidents, demanding clear answers from the relevant authorities and calling for a comprehensive and properly funded overhaul of the UK's critical infrastructure. There is a growing recognition that some of these essential systems may indeed be reaching a critical breaking point, and that significant and sustained investment is urgently needed to upgrade the electricity grid, bolster cyber defenses across all sectors, and proactively tackle the growing issue of water scarcity in order to prevent potentially disastrous consequences for both the economy and the general public.
Well, thankfully, no serious injuries were reported as a direct result of the London Underground debacle. It clearly had a very significant economic and morale impact on the city on that particular day. Let's certainly hope that the ongoing investigations into this incident, as well as the earlier fire at Heathrow Airport, can provide some clear and conclusive answers and lead to the implementation of effective measures to prevent similar widespread disruptions from occurring in the future.
Indeed. Transport for London has publicly vowed to conduct a thorough and comprehensive investigation into the precise cause of the power blackout, and to implement all necessary steps to prevent any similar recurrences. The fact that the detailed investigation into the earlier and equally disruptive fire at Heathrow Airport reportedly remains unresolved only underscores the pressing urgency of addressing the underlying systemic issues that appear to be affecting our critical infrastructure networks.
Finally, let's turn our attention to the concerningly low levels of water in UK reservoirs and the broader and rather worrying fears of widespread drought conditions across Europe. It sounds as though we could potentially be facing a very dry and challenging summer period.
Sadly, the situation regarding water resources is indeed quite concerning. The Environment Agency has recently reported that England is currently experiencing its driest start to the spring season in a considerable 69 years. And as a direct consequence of this prolonged lack of rainfall, overall reservoir levels across the country are now plummeting.
Dry spring in 69 years. That's serious.
National reservoir capacity is currently significantly lower than it was even during the last notable drought year in 2022. And the crucial Thames Valley region has recorded exceptionally low levels of rainfall so far this year, the lowest recorded since 1944. This worrying trend in the UK is unfortunately mirroring a broader pattern across much of continental Europe, with many regions currently facing significant and increasing risks of severe drought conditions developing over the coming months.
It's rather hard not to immediately think back to the very severe drought that the UK experienced back in 1976, which was a really significant and disruptive event for the country. Are there any notable parallels that we can draw between that historical drought and the current situation?
There are indeed some notable and rather concerning parallels. The 1976 drought stands as one of the most severe climate-related crises that the UK faced during the 20th century, with a prolonged period of exceptionally low rainfall, coupled with scorching summer temperatures leading to very severe water restrictions being imposed, and widespread public anxiety.
I remember hearing stories about standpipes in the street.
Exactly. We saw emergency measures being implemented, such as the enactment of the Drought Act, which allowed for the imposition of stringent restrictions on water usage, and the reallocation of water resources in affected areas. While the public response to the drought conditions experienced in the UK during the summer of 2022 was perhaps less dramatic in urban areas, rural farmers faced very significant anxieties regarding crop irrigation and livestock welfare. And there was considerable public frustration directed towards water companies regarding the persistent issue of water leaks in their supply networks.
Ah, yes, the leaks issue always comes up.
Both the 1976 and 2022 drought events rather starkly exposed underlying issues such as insufficient national reservoir capacity and a history of underinvestment in essential water infrastructure, issues that, regrettably, still appear to persist to some extent today.
And the concerning drought situation isn't just confined to the United Kingdom, is it? It sounds as though much of continental Europe is also facing a significant risk of widespread water shortages.
That's absolutely correct. The European Drought Observatory's most recent report paints a rather alarming picture across significant swaths of Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe, with prolonged periods of low rainfall and unseasonably high temperatures combining to create widespread and increasing drought risks.
Where is it worst affected in Europe?
Germany, for example, experienced its driest March on record this year, significantly impacting water levels in the crucial Rhine River. and raising serious concerns about the condition of northern agricultural soils, which are described as being severely dry. Important agricultural regions such as Poland and Ukraine are also currently facing widespread drought warnings following unusually dry winter periods. The Iberian Peninsula is particularly hard hit, with eastern regions of Spain currently on red alert due to devastating crop losses already reaching as high as 80% in some areas.
80% crop losses. Devastating for farmers.
Absolutely. And neighboring Portugal reporting that a staggering 90% of its national territory is currently affected by drought conditions. The wider Mediterranean region, including countries such as Greece, Cyprus, Malta, and Western Turkey, is also continuing to grapple with ongoing drought conditions, which are significantly increasing the risk of severe wildfires during the upcoming summer months. Even parts of Central Europe and the Baltic states, including Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Belarus, are reporting worryingly low river flow levels.
It certainly sounds as though both the general public and governments across Europe are becoming increasingly concerned about this growing water crisis.
They are indeed. While public awareness of the severity of the situation might be somewhat lower in urban areas during the initial stages of a drought, farmers and agricultural producers across Europe are becoming increasingly alarmed by the growing threat to their crops and the potential for significant water shortages impacting their livelihoods.
So what are governments doing?
We are seeing varying levels of government response across the affected regions, with some countries already implementing water usage restrictions and actively seeking emergency aid and resources, while the European Union itself is in the process of developing a comprehensive EU water resilience strategy, which is expected to be published in June of this year. However, some concerns remain regarding the adequacy of the financial resources being allocated to tackle this growing problem, and the varying capacities of different nations to respond effectively, particularly those countries that are also currently facing other significant challenges, such as ongoing conflicts and economic constraints.
So what is the current outlook for the United Kingdom as we head further into the spring and towards the summer months?
The UK's National Drought Group has been actively meeting to discuss potential measures that may need to be implemented this year if the dry conditions persist, including the possibility of imposing hosepipe bans and other restrictions on non-essential water usage in the most affected areas.
Hosepipe bans again, potentially.
Potentially. The Environment Agency is also reporting notably low flow levels in many rivers across the country, and an earlier than usual reliance on irrigation by farmers, which is already putting additional strain on local water resources. Experts are drawing worrying parallels with the severe drought of 1976, highlighting the long-term impact of climate change on rainfall patterns, and the fact that very few new large-scale reservoirs have been constructed in the UK in the last 30 years to increase water storage capacity.
No new reservoirs in 30 years. That seems short-sighted.
It's a point frequently raised. The significant and long-standing issue of water company leaks, which result in the loss of billions of liters of treated water annually, also urgently needs to be addressed. Without significant and sustained rainfall in the coming weeks and months, the UK, particularly the agricultural regions in the east of England, faces a very real and increasing risk of experiencing severe water shortages later in the year.
It certainly sounds as though the Environment Agency is strongly urging both the public and the water companies themselves to take this unfolding situation very seriously indeed.
Absolutely. The Environment Agency is actively calling on the public to be extremely mindful of their water usage and to adopt water-saving habits wherever possible. They're also demanding greater transparency and accountability from water companies in terms of actively addressing leaks in their networks and investing in essential infrastructure upgrades to improve resilience.
But short-term fixes aren't enough.
Experts in the field are warning that short-term emergency measures can only ever provide temporary relief, and that significant long-term strategic investment in new water infrastructure, such as reservoirs and desalination plants, alongside concerted efforts to repair leaky pipes, is absolutely crucial to building genuine resilience against future and potentially more severe drought events. The European Drought Observatory's current forecast of continued drier than average conditions in the UK, Ireland, and across much of Northern Europe for the coming months only underscores the pressing urgency of undertaking these essential long-term investments.
So as you can hear, it has certainly been a rather eventful and busy week, both here in the UK and further afield in Hong Kong. From reflecting on pivotal moments in our shared history and navigating complex shifts in national security arrangements, to grappling with the ongoing vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure and the increasing pressures of environmental change, There is certainly a great deal for us all to consider.
Thank you for joining us for this in-depth look into these interconnected stories from hkcitizen.net. For more detailed reporting and insightful analysis on these and other important developments, please do visit our official website at hkcitizen.net and follow us on our various social media channels where you can find all our latest updates and commentary.
Thank you for listening to This Week Unpacked on the HK Citizen podcast. Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye.
This program was produced in London.